Hi all, I have a mega exciting engine versus engine game to show you. So both of these engines are near the top of the rating lists, but Komodo much more than Hannibal. Hannibal's around in the top 20, but Komodo's usually 1 or 2 at the moment. The commercial Komodo is version 10. Before, I believe version 8 it was free. It came to be now a commercial chess engine. This is a very exciting dramatic game that I'd like to show you. The TCEC, by the way, is an acronym which can stand for Foreign Chess Engine Competition, named after one of the people making the whole competition work. It's his brainchild. Or it could you could think of it as the top chess engine championship as well. So anyway, let's have a look at this game. D4 from Komodo. We have the first few moves are taken, they're the book moves. Up to the first 8 full moves are all book actually. This is from a book, opening book. So I believe it's on the 9th, about the 9th move here. They start thinking for themselves. So bishop g5, we have bishop e7. And now already, this is already setting the tone for the rest of the game. This next move here, which you might not expect from an engine. You might expect this sort of move from a hack attacker like myself, trying to win the game as quickly as possible in a multi-round tournament. The next move for white here, can you guess what white played in this position? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. So black has just retreated the bishop. What would you do here? It's quite committal. H4, obviously to try and, if taking, there's some pressure on black's king on that H file. Who cares about the double pawns when the king is the ultimate reward there. Bishop b7, black avoids taking on g5, and white again sets the tone even more with castling queenside. So opposite side castling are often very entertaining games, with both sides usually going for it, at least in human versus human games. We see knight c6, e4, and now h6, prompting that bishop to move or to take on e7, prompting a bit more at least, but it does take on e7, which kind of weakens d6 a bit. The dark squares in general, especially the side with the initiative, should be able to exploit sometimes a weakened colour complex, but here the dark squares on both sides are under great scrutiny potentially. White now plays g4. It seems very logical to go with tempo to try and open up the lines against the black king. Knight f4. Now queen d2. So it does attack the knight, and potentially d7 is loose, but the knight retreats here, and white's not interested in d7 here. This could actually kind of backfire for black. Has various ideas there. White is interested in playing an attack. White plays h5. Okay, we have knight ge5, knight takes. Okay, should white protect this pawn? Well, from a human perspective, this is an open road to the opponent's king. I mean, we're simpletons in terms of technical analysis compared to engines, but our intuition is telling us that, you know, sometimes it's often desirable to lose such pawns just to get an attack. You might lose in an endgame, but the opponent's more likely to lose in the middle game before that. So the next move might not be too shocking if I ask you to guess it here. White play in this position. 5 seconds to pause the video. f4. The tone has certainly been set already with opposite side castling. This is a hack attack game. Knight takes g4, so we have rook g1. And it already looks pretty scary. If the knight retreats, there's automatically, for example, things like f5, threatening queen takes h6. As an example. But actually, black plays queen h4. We have bishop e2. So there's a subtle difference here. The black queen's a bit more annoying, a nuisance queen here. And it seems ridiculous, but black is intending to munch this pawn as well. So Hannibal is playing the role of, it's like a caricature of an old engine just gobbling up material, and it doesn't matter that the black king, its own king, is in the vicinity, because as long as it calculates no actual concrete danger, then it's testing this. It really is testing this idea. Well, what's the problem? Show me the money. Where's the concrete evidence that I can't try and gobble another pawn? So after Queen E3 now is played in this position, black actually does gobble another pawn. Yeah, and you might think this is like, can it actually be proven that the loss of 2 pawns here is a good attack or not? Is it a convincing attack technically? Now F4 is the 3rd pawn being threatened here, so something has to be done about that. Now it seems this might seem like a rook g4 a tempting move, but actually that wasn't played here. White actually snapped off that knight, and we have queen takes h5. And there's no rush to threaten a mate on g7 here. You might think, or even doubling rooks, it seems. One of the first things that white does here, and we're seeing obviously the results of brute force calculation, but if we try and express this intuitively, what is happening here? It seems one of the previous things that happened, that weakening on the dark squares, is first tapped into to entrench an aggressive central knight. We see knight b5, so pretty calm about being 2 pawns down, just wanting to establish first this strong, potentially strong central knight. Queen c5, black wants the exchange of queens to go to their endgame. White wants to just checkmate the opponent's king in the middle game, so threatening mate in 1. Some weakening move now, g6 to stop that. You might consider that there might have been other defensive tries as well, but black has to compromise. There's a bit of pressure there on its king. The knight entrenches with tempo now, protecting e4 and hitting the bishop. A very tactical response in this position. Bishop d5, trying to win this knight like that, get rid of this knight ASAP. So we have a very, very interesting, crazy looking position already. And is black kind of just defending this? Where is the attack? This is the very, very interesting thing about chess and king safety. I think we cannot possibly underestimate king safety. And this starts to be very, very interesting. How does white actually concretely prove an attack can crash down on the opponent's king here? And okay, there's a small issue about the knight, but white's on the bishop, and also c4 is protected by the knight. White to play. What does white play in this position, you think? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. Okay, there are some very tempting possibilities which need to be checked out, but the one that was played was actually rook h1. Basically wanting to coordinate from checkmate on h8. If this can be taken, and then queen h8 or rook h8 will be checkmate. So very, very interesting. Black plays h5. What does white play in this position? Now this gets a little bit shocking now, at least from human perspective. So white to play here, if I give you 5 seconds. Okay, rook takes h5, so it is threatening mate. G takes, so you might wonder, well, what is this? Isn't the queen covering g1? So white is now a rook down, and a pawn down, white takes that bishop now. So it's only the exchange down, actually, because this knight cannot be taken without losing control of g1, which would be resulting in mating. So if queen takes, then rook g1 check, and then that's like mate. So the exchange down, the knight cannot be taken. So yeah, a nicely centralized, you could say an octopus knight on d6 in all directions. So looking at things like f7, and it cannot be taken here. The black queen comes to basically take another pawn, potentially, and keep control of g1. It's threatening to take another pawn. Now we see queen e5 not only protecting f4, but threatening things like queen g5, and to knock out that defensive pawn on h5. And then we can have a check, and then rook h1 check for the rook to participate. We see now in this position queen g3, and white actually does take on h5, letting f4 drop, king b1, and again it's far too dangerous to take the knight. That would be just an immediate kind of termination of the check. Yeah, that's mating. So we see king trying to help itself with king g7. Now it's interesting here, you might be tempted by the check, and actually on checking this game with a much lower spec engine, I believe actually the check does actually lead white to an advantage here in this position. It wasn't actually played. Something maybe even stronger was played technically. In this position there's a very, very good move for white available, because that octopus knight is affording this move. It's on f7. Can you see what white can play here? If I give you 5 seconds. Okay, rook g4. Yeah, the queen and knight are coordinating on f7, so the rook can't move, and also, you know, check is threatened. This is just too dangerous. If queen takes, then there's queen g5. It's an advantage for white. This is good for white. But even better technically is a weird looking move, queen h1, and the follow-up is absolutely amazing. And black here is faced with, for example, rook g1 check, and at minimum rook f1 to pick up the queen. So the queen kind of gets out of the way. There's a very, very interesting question I had to ask about this position before we look at that, is what happens on rook h8? And believe it or not, this queen h1 has a certain design. It ticks an obscure box. We wouldn't be thinking about this when we, as humans, we have our attention on this side of the board and the king. But the engines have a holistic view of an attack. They're looking at every single square of the chessboard, and this h1 is not looking just at the g5, it's looking at even the a8, the potential loose rook. So here queen g2 check is actually a strong move. So if king f6, rook f1, but if king f8, there's a disconnection of the rooks, and that means d takes, which not only protects the knight, it hits this rook here. This is actually very, very good for white, this position. That's very, very dangerous, hitting that rook. So I found that quite fascinating. And on, say, rook g8 to try and give f8, then d takes is pretty strong. With this f file is very, very dangerous. But the defensive try is queen h6 that was played. We have rook g1 check, king h7, and now after queen f3, rook h1 is going to be picking up that queen. How does black avoid losing the queen here? It doesn't seem possible. So black plays f5, so losing the queen. The trend is upwards now for white simply. after winning that queen, the queen and knight do a very good job against the two rooks. So we have queen takes, queen e1 with possibilities of queen e5 as well as hitting e6 now. Queen g3 check, queen h4 check, and the tricky thing here about this is if king e5, then there's knight f7 check, winning one of the rooks, because if it takes, then there's queen takes d8. So here queen e7, centralizing with the knight. Aesthetically, very interesting thing to do at the very least, let alone functionality can be investigated later, but the powerful centralization here is crippling for black's rooks. They're just being overcome by the hugely central queen and knight in this position. Both rooks cannot move basically without losing material, like d7 then e6 later. So we see the measly looking a6, d takes, now taking on e6 might afford rook f6 here, and then where is the next check? No, we see knight f7. Okay, so in this position it's very, very interesting. And the knight's got things like e5 check if needed. We see rook d1 check, so the rooks are being disconnected by force. And one of the rooks is dropping off now, basically. After this, there's check. There's no point playing rook f6 because there's queen g8 check. So one of the rooks is coming off the board, so it's just queen against rook. And here, I think operators, or the threshold was such that an operator resigned on Hannibal's behalf. Now the game looks as though Hannibal, which seriously, it's one of the top. It's looking at chess rating list for engine CCRL 4040 on June the 18th. Hannibal's rated 3122. It's rank 18 on the list. Komodo's rank 1 3367. The game tells us what we kind of pick up from our own experience, that you shouldn't take pawns in front of your king. There's another interesting aspect about playing attacks holistically, you know, looking at loose pieces at the same time as trying to get to the opponent's king. Then you're maximizing your potential rewards and all the variations. You're not just either mating your opponent or winning material over here. You're winning material on potentially other obscure looking squares like a8. This move queen h1 just echoes a8 in some of the variations, the loose rook, when the rooks can sometimes be disconnected. The calmness of just putting a knight on d6 and then wrenching open one of the files, damaging black's king safety, and black just couldn't avoid losing the queen, it seems. It seems as though it's an instructive looking attacking game, even though we can't simulate the brute force of the engines. There seems to be some takeaway instructive lessons for how to conduct an attack, I believe. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.